Welcome to the Ben Mulroney Show on this Monday, June 2nd. I hope everybody is gearing up for a great week ahead. And look, I have been very clear with the audience of the Ben Mulroney Show where my biases lie and who I supported in the last election and why. And, you know, I think I treat my audience with respect and as intelligent people. So you can take what I say and interpret it through whatever filter you personally have. And I've been very clear that I fought long and hard for my candidate and my choice in the last election. Didn't pan out for me. So I put my swords down because I don't think it is, I don't think it's beneficial to, for me at least, to be on the offense all the time. We have a new government which needs to be given every opportunity to succeed based on the vision that they got elected on. And the good news for people like myself is there's a lot of alignment, generally speaking, as to what I want, what I wanted in my government and what this government is currently espousing. So I want Mark Carney and his team to be successful. And right now he is entering a very, well, it's pivotal. It's a pivotal moment in the fight for energy independence, Canada becoming this energy superpower, and interprovincial trade barriers. And that's where I want to start our conversation today. Prime Minister Mark Carney yesterday sat down with oil and gas executives in Calgary. It was a closed-door meeting. And this is significant. I'm looking at the picture that was posted on Mark Carney's Twitter, and he sat down with dozens of members of the oil and gas industry. It was him and just all these executives. CEOs of Tourmaline Oil, Pathway Alliance President Kendall Dilling, President of Cenovus. And reporters were only allowed to hear a few of the comments from the Prime Minister before being asked to leave the room. So I'm a good faith guy, and I have to believe that Mark Carney didn't go in that room to try to wordsmith his way out of building pipelines. I have to believe that he sat with them to hear what they had to say. And I cannot believe that this many executives would go into a room like that to be taken advantage of by somebody who was acting in bad faith. So this is a good indication that we could be moving towards a future where these pipelines of national importance are built, right? And and not only that, I mean, they talked about a number of things. 38 CEOs of Canadian energy companies signed a letter congratulating him. And I'm looking at how many people were in this room. I don't think it's 38, but it's pretty darn close. And, you know that on the table was lifting the tanker ban off the West Coast and, all of these energy project killing laws that were the stock and trade of the Trudeau liberals. Mark Carney said he was a different kind of liberal and his government would be different from Trudeau's. Now is his opportunity to prove it. A lot of people believed him when he said it, but then you have people like me who are demanding a little more proof, a lot more proof. This, if he comes out of these conversations with a commitment to start building, then I will be more inclined to believe what he said on the campaign. He's also going to be going into his first minister's meeting, and it's nice to see that the burden of working towards taking down all the interprovincial trade barriers that slow down our Canadian economy by placing all sorts of regulations in one province that don't exist in another. I'm glad to see that the entire burden doesn't rest on the shoulders of the federal government, but that the provincial leaders are taking matters into their own hands to speed up that process. You'll remember last week the drama of the Liberation Day tariffs, where a three-judge panel in the United States ruled that all the Liberation Day tariffs were unconstitutional, and the president had 10 days to lift them. And then another court saying, no, you don't have to lift them while you are appealing. So they're still in place. You'll remember that Donald Trump was told, though, that his other tariffs, the steel and aluminum ones, those were okay. And our prime minister came out and sort of gave his opinion. He was glad that they were taken down. I didn't think much of it, but upon reading his words again, I got to wonder whether that miffed Donald Trump just a little bit, because he stood up in front of a crowd and said he was doubling the steel tariffs. Wherever the steel imports come from, doubling them from 25% to 50%. And for context, the U.S. imported $31.3 billion U.S. worth of iron and steel last year. Canada was the top source of iron and steel, shipping $7.6 billion worth to the U.S. So $7.6 billion, that's over 10 billion Canadian. And now that is getting slapped with a 50% tariff. I also have to wonder whether part of his arithmetic is he's hedging because he's worried that his Liberation Day tariffs will eventually be cast down. That power will be taken away from him. And so he's looking to, increase the tariff revenue from someplace. And seeing as how that 3-judge panel didn't take issue with his steel and aluminum tariffs, he's looking to get more money from that source. I don't know. We'll have to see. And meanwhile, we are in that dangerous time of the year where wildfires are just all too commonplace across this country. More people in northern Manitoba were told to leave their homes on Saturday as Scott Moe, Saskatchewan Premier, warned that the number of evacuees in his province will likely climb as more and more wildfires are threatening more and more communities. There's more and more smoke and fire. So we're talking like 600 residents in a place called Cranberry Portage in northwestern Manitoba were placed under a mandatory evacuation order. This is out of control. This is out of control. Unfortunately, in our next segment, we're going to be talking about a company that is trying to mitigate the risk of these wildfires as much as possible. So don't go anywhere. When we come back, that conversation on The Ben Mulroney Show. Welcome back to the Ben Mulroney Show. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of your Monday with us. It's that time of the week where we like to talk about marketing and strategy and media with a good friend of the show, Tony Chapman. He's the host of the award-winning podcast, Chatter That Matters, as well as the founder of Chatter AI. Tony, happy Monday to you.
I got to love your studio. I love the fact that you're putting it out on YouTube. Well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, you and I have talked about this a lot, about how streamers have an advantage when it comes to advertising because they can pinpoint the demographic that an advertiser is looking for down to the person. Very, very granular stuff. And now Netflix is going to be adding AI, I guess, to supercharge that offering.
Yeah, I mean, traditional media was always about a big draft net. Coke opens happiness. I'm going to spread it across the entire world and capture wherever I can.
Yeah.
And then when social media came along, they said, well, actually, we can target it very precisely to the gender, demographic, location.
Yeah.
And then mobile came along and said, well, not only that, we can target the ad as the person's walking down the street saying, come in for a cup of coffee. What's happening now with generative AI and Netflix is another game changer, which is you're watching your program. They know who you are, how long you're watching, what else you stream. They know the genre you're watching. They know the actors you're watching. They create an ad just for you. So they're fly fishing the exact ad with the exact bait at the exact time. For example, hey, I love what you're looking. I love that turtleneck you got on. You can buy it right now. So that's how powerful we're getting in terms of your data, which you excrete just by watching Netflix, and their ability to fashion the perfect ad at the right time, very often to get you buy something you never wanted or needed, but suddenly you feel you deserve.
But what's going to happen to sort of traditional ad agencies if all of this is going to be happening? I'm assuming Netflix is going to be building this themselves. So what's going to happen to traditional ad agencies that are hired to come up with campaigns and to hire to storyboard these things, and then they put a team together and they hire the actors and then they edit these things and then they bring them back to the company and the company says yes. I mean, how is this going to work? It feels like this will upend another industry.
Yeah, it's the biggest sledgehammer to hit. And we're already seeing the big agencies imploding because they realize they can't hold on to the body of work that justified their fees and justified offices with pool tables and espresso machines. And now what's happening is Netflix not going to produce anything. AI is going to produce it.
Yeah.
So the reality is the data gets fed into an algorithm and turns into an ad. Now it will take 3 seconds, 4 seconds to create that ad, maybe a nanosecond in the future. So again, what we've got to all come to terms with as a society, what are we going to do when there's no jobs? Because AI is going to populate every corner of our marketplace. I could clone your voice in 10 minutes and have that show out in 50 different languages. And you're going, well, what do we need producers for that? No, we just need AI. So we have to come to terms with society. This is one of many ways in which it's just going to disrupt what we used to take for granted was a good day's work.
I mean, I was assuming that this would be obviously disruptive to sort of traditional broadcasters, and all the ad dollars are going to migrate to a place like Netflix. I'm sure Amazon Prime is going to be on this and so on. But I hadn't even thought about sort of the people producing the ads, that this is going to be something that happens and as you said, could implode an entire other industry.
And this is not stretching your imagination. There could be 1,000 versions of your show airing next month based on what I'm interested in hearing. And they know your voice. They take the data, they fashion the stories, and they put it out. So I'm getting a very custom version of your show. I like your personality. I like your persona. I like your conservative views. But I'm really more interested in some of the things that when you talk about sports and entertainment. And as I tune into that, I will now get more of that show. It's the same reason why Spotify adjust the playlist based on what you're interested, the reco economy. With generative AI now, I'm not just recommending the Beatles, I'm actually creating a Beatle-like song for you.
Sure, yeah, but the problem with that is every now and then I say something that pisses people off. And that's one of the reasons people tune in. And it's the Howard Stern effect, right? They for every one person that tunes in because they love Howard Stern, or at least the old Howard Stern, there were 2 or 3 that tuned in because they couldn't stand him. And if it feels to me that what you're describing is a world where there could be an AI version of the Ben Mulroney show that is tailored exactly to what you like. And what you like is me agreeing with you all the time. And that's not the Ben Mulroney show. The wild card is when I throw in something that surprises people.
It's also going to factor in your text boards and realize there's a spike of text when people disagree with you. So they're going to make sure that friction is part of the show. So again, it's just like what George does and what your team does is human connections, what works and doesn't work, and they put it together. Algorithms just do that through data. It's not to say that we don't need the human touch, but I can tell you something. Someone like you is going to have an orchestra of 80 instruments. 78 of them are going to be AI, and 2 of them are going to be human. And the reality is those 2 are going to have the most extraordinary job in the world because they got this massive orchestra. The other 76 are going to go, what happened to my job? And that's what, people have been yelling at me for years. I'm doom and gloom in AI. It is coming. It's going to hit hard and it's going to impact all of society. And this is just one of the many stories.
Well, listen, that dovetails perfectly into this next story that artificial intelligence could sound the death knell for entry-level white-collar jobs while causing U.S. unemployment to rise as high as 20%. That's a huge number, but some are saying it could be even higher than that.
Yeah, I think my prediction is it's going to be 40 or 50%, which is going to be universal income. We have to find a way because we can't sell lipsticks to AI. So we have to find in a consumer economy something to give consumers cash to do. But the most important thing is purpose. We find a lot of purpose in our jobs. A lot of people say, I hate my job. But the reality is you get social interaction. You get to go to work. You get to dress up. You get to escape, might be a pattern of sort of boredom to go off and to find your path. You take those away, you take the entry levels away, the rungs on the ladder where I first become an adult, where I start learning responsibility. And I wonder how that's going to bode for a society. I really do think jobs are an important part of our psychology. And until we figure that out, you can give me all the money you do, but idle minds is the devil's workshop. And we've seen time and time again when countries have high youth unemployment, it's correlated to crime, it's correlated to mental health issues. And I fear that's what's happening already in our society with 16% youth unemployment in Canada.
I want to talk now about Caitlin Clark, the massive star in the WNBA, and the impact that she's having on the growth of that league. So apparently she was responsible for 26.5% of all WNBA economic activity last season. And by every metric, or almost every metric, the WNBA is currently growing. The question is her impact on the WNBA greater than Michael Jordan's was in the 90s? And what does the WNBA have to do to ensure that this moment that they're having is turned into a movement?
Fantastic question. So first of all, it's apples and oranges because the NBA was already established. But what they need to do, all sports needs, is rivalry. Having one person as your lead singer and you depend on it, it's almost a Gretzky effect. They go down to Los Angeles and suddenly people start falling in love with hockey. But it's only when there's tension, rivalry, debate, who's the best, do I think really fuels the growth of a sport versus just the growth of the individual. And you look back at golf, Tiger Woods for a long time just was a runaway train, and golf kind of got very predictable. As you start getting challengers, so what they need to do is they need to find other talent of that level that you can go out and start having the conversations. Who do you think is better? And that's what creates an appetite to watch.
But like I said, it's about keeping it going as well, right? Because had Vince Carter not come to Toronto, Toronto would not have learnt about basketball in the way that they did, and that education would not have turned into the passion that has now fueled basketball in Toronto and indeed across Canada. And it's sustained the Raptors even in years where they're not competitive. And that's, I think, the analog that I'm looking for with the WNBA. What do they have to do to ensure that on days where Caitlin Clark isn't playing, on if she's injured for long stretches, when she ultimately retires, what happens to that league when she is gone? Are they able to take advantage of this to bring in fans who aren't just fans of Caitlin Clark, but fans of the women's game? Because that's what's going to sustain them long after she's gone.
That's the greatest challenge that all women's sports face, because there's a real appetite for them. They're getting sponsors right up front, giving them permission to go forward on it. But the thing is, they've got to knock out, because we only have 24 hours a day, and there's an absolute too much and too many chasing our time already. So what is women's sports going to do to knock out other sports so that we have a consideration to go to the games and spend our money and our dollars? That's the biggest challenge. Any sport that's not sort of in that top 2 or 3 phases,
Tony,
it's like any brand in a grocery store.
Tony, got to run. This is the Ben Mulroney Show, and thank you so much for listening to us on the radio, on streaming apps, or it may very well be that you listen to us in podcast form on Spotify, Apple Music, or Amazon Music, and now you can find us in video form on YouTube. So wherever you find us, we say welcome and we say thank you. So if you know the expression that revenge is a dish best served cold, then a corollary to that could be that if you are fighting an unprovoked war with Russia and you are in a weakened position, then maybe the best way to hit back is by planning over the course of a year and a half. Here to discuss one of the most creative and effective offensives that Ukraine has had in this war, probably the most effective, when we saw a drone attack deep within the heart of Russia that affected so many aspects of its war machine. Our two great guests, Marcus Kolga, he's a senior fellow at MacDonald Laurier Institute and founder of disinfowatch, and Adam Zivo, who is a National Post columnist and knows more about what's going on in Ukraine than most. To both of you, I say welcome to the Ben Mulroney Show.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so Marcus, I'd love for you to break this down. Jason Kenney, I think, effectively wrote in a tweet that this is Mossad-level genius. Why don't you tell us about what happened over the weekend and why this is this rises to the level of what he called Mossad-level genius?
Yeah, you couldn't get the best Hollywood script writers to write a script like this. I mean, it's just incredible, this operation. So over the past year, what happened is that Ukrainian intelligence basically concocted this plan to produce multiple lightweight drones, to place them into shipping containers and on trucks, basically deliver them into Russia, and then have them sort of remotely deployed from these trucks across 5 different time zones at incredible distances from Ukraine, in the middle of Siberia, basically the far east of Russia, remotely deploying these drones undetected to attack Russian military sites across Russia. And the results were spectacular. I mean, we have at least 40 Russian strategic bombers. These are bombers that have been used to drop cruise missiles, various different other munitions on Ukrainian cities and such, destroying 40 strategic bombers, causing at least $7 billion in damage. So the fact that this went undetected and the scale of success of this operation is really miraculous.
And Adam, I think one of the things that Jason Kenney highlights as well is that Russia will now have to carefully inspect hundreds of thousands of truck trailers, cargo containers, and temporary structures, and they'll have to tighten massively inspection of cargo imports. This is, time and money is binary. The time and money that you spend on checking one thing is time and money you can't spend doing something else. So they're going to have their hands full making sure that this volley by Ukraine wasn't a one-off. They have to assume there's going to be more.
Well, of course, and this is where I think the Ukrainians are doing something very intelligent. So after they launched this attack, they weren't shy about how it was done. They carefully explained how they managed to destroy all of these bombers. And basically, it was a warning to the Russians that we've done this before, we can do it again. Now you have to check your entire supply chain very carefully, which then, of course, wreaks economic havoc. And Russia right now is not exactly in a position to lose internal trade, right? I mean, right now they've got high inflation, they have high interest rates, their economy is sputtering, and that's a concern. So this is both an economic, psychological, and a military victory. However, we have to keep in mind that anything that the Ukrainians do to the Russians can now do to any other Western adversary. So we've opened up a Pandora's box. The Ukrainians happen to have been the first ones to have realized that drones can be deployed this way, but now our enemies know that this can be done as well. And so this might revolutionize how we conceptualize security for our military sites going forward, and raise new protocols for security relating to transportation of sensitive materials, much in the same way how 9/11 changed the game when it came to airport security. Now, that doesn't make the Ukrainians the bad guy. They were just the first to realize that war can be waged this way. And I would prefer that they made this innovation than anyone else.
I've got to ask about what the psychological impact on the Russian people might be, Marcus, because for the longest time, this was a war that was happening. I mean, every now and then, the Ukrainians would be able to lob some an attack from their own territory into Russia. But this is the first time that it started in Russia. And I've got to wonder if this has a psychological toll on the people and perhaps on their allegiance to this war.
Well, certainly. I mean, for those Russians who are able to receive information about this attack, it will impact them. It means that though their cities, even as remote as some of these locations may have been, that they aren't necessarily safe. But I don't think that Russian media will, quite frankly, report on the true scale or the nature of this operation, other than to try and blame Ukrainians. I think that it will change the calculus when it comes to Russia's leadership. I mean, this is this operation, as much as it was a success for Ukraine, it's also a success for NATO and Canada, because now this has really degraded Russia's perhaps its future planning for an attack on the Baltic states, and also its operations targeting the Arctic. 40 strategic bombers, that's a huge number. It's 1/3 of Russia's capabilities. So this has a huge benefit for NATO and Canada as well.
Adam, explain the timing of this attack, knowing that today there was a meeting in Istanbul on either call them peace talks or talks to slow down the war. So they've already happened today. But explain to me the justification or the reasoning behind hitting them hard today in advance of those talks.
Well, so we have to keep in mind is that these peace talks are not genuine peace talks because Putin is not genuinely interested in peace. He hasn't dropped his unreasonable demands that Ukraine cede future territory. And there were rumors that Russia was planning a major strike on Ukrainian cities last night in the lead up to these peace talks to demoralize Ukraine and pressure Ukraine into accepting a bad peace, which would leave the country vulnerable to dismemberment in the future. Ukraine then flipped the script by destroying 1/3 of Russia's strategic bombing capability. And so now they have the upper hand in these Potemkin negotiations. They were able to avoid being cornered diplomatically. So I think that this move is brilliant in its symbolic value as well as its military value.
I want to ask you guys a question, and I may be asking you to speculate here, but I looked at this sort of complex and long-term and sophisticated this offensive was. And I got to wonder, like, could the U.S. have not known anything about this? They're claiming they know nothing about it, but it just feels to me like something like this has to happen with, I don't know, a few advisors from the U.S. helping out with laying out these plans. Am I being conspiratorial about that? What do you think? Marcus, you go first.
I would, well, just very quickly. I mean, this didn't really require much assistance from Russian or rather U.S. intelligence. The Ukrainian intelligence, they knew exactly where these targets were. They had the devices, the drones, placed in close proximity to them. So I'm not sure that they really needed too much assistance from the U.S. on this one. And quite frankly, I think that's a benefit. We know what happened with the Pete Hegseth and the Signal chat. So it's probably a good thing that the U.S. didn't know about this.
Adam?
Yeah, I would concur. I mean, I don't think that the Ukrainians let the Americans know about this because the Trump administration can't be trusted to keep this secret. Also, this isn't a very complicated, operation. You just have to smuggle a few hundred drones into Russia and place them near military bases. And I know that sounds complicated, but these drones are not that expensive. They're pretty easy to hide. These are drones that are commercial grade, the kind that you can buy your kids, obviously not with explosives attached. So they basically just put drones inside a shipping container, move that in a truck to an airbase, created a remote control roof that could open. It's not that hard. Yeah,
it's a remote control roof that it impresses the heck out of me. And these swarms of drones coming out. Anyway, it's a heck of I don't know if it's a good news story, but I certainly love it when the good guys score one. And I thank both of you for joining me today. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much for watching the show. Now, if you enjoyed what you saw, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode of The Ben Mulroney Show.